Welcome, guys, to this masterclass about VR workflows in Mistika Boutique. We're going to cover here in this masterclass some advanced techniques that weren't covered in the first masterclass that we did about VR in Mistika Boutique. We will stay the whole time in Mistika Boutique, so this time we're not going to work with Mistika VR at all. But you will see that the functionality for the stitching process, which is going to be our first step in this masterclass, is exactly the same. We're going to focus on those small differences that exist between Mistika Boutique and Mistika VR that can change a little bit the workflow that we use for stitching and for managing the VR project in Mistika Boutique. And then we will focus in finishing tasks in Mistika Boutique that can only be done in Mistika Boutique. In this time, there is no possibility to do this kind of tasks and jobs in other softwares. In fact, we are going to show in here a workflow that cannot be matched but any other solution in the market. It's a very powerful workflow using the raw media the whole time. And in this case, because in the previous masterclass, we use Mistika Boutique for covering the whole workflow for VR projects. So we make the stitch, well, in Mistika VR in this case, we open that media in Mistika Boutique and then make the edit in Boutique, make the color grading there, some compositing, some adjustments, some finishing adjustments, and then deliver the final result. In this particular case, we're going to insert or to add external softwares. Of course, we're not going to show those softwares. We're going just to talk about them. But in this case, we're going to talk about PTGui for example, PTGui, Hugin, or AutoPanel to make the stitching, and the most important part, using an editor for make the editing of our VR project using the stitch that we are going to create in Mistika Boutique, and then conform against the raw media in Mistika Boutique to continue the job. So first thing I'm going to do is to clean my timeline. So I'm going to remove these two images, and I'm going to start with my clean timeline here. I've already created a project that I called VR Masterclass. I'm not going to create a new project. We see this functionality in other masterclasses, and I need this project because I have some rendered files over there. But if you need to create a new project, remember, just go to new project. You have here the resolution and the frame rate, okay, and just put the name for your new project, and then continue the job as we're going to do in this session. All right, so we have this project open. And the first thing is how we can just load the VR media in Mistika Boutique. This is one of the most different aspects between Mistika Boutique and Mistika VR. Because if we go to my media folder, well, in this case, this is my project folder. I have some media already imported, but we are going to re-import it again. But for now, I'm going to load this one. So if we go to here and load those clips, let me select them. Is loading. We're using, by the way, all the time Insta360 footage. We're going to use Insta360 Titan and the Insta360 Pro footage. The Insta360 Titan is a very high quality media. It has 10 bits of color depth and a very high resolution. For that reason, you will see that sometimes, because again, we're using raw media, sometimes the navigation can be a little bit slower compared with Insta360 Pro, but other than that, it works perfectly well. So again, as I was explaining, when we load a number of files in my timeline in Mistika Boutique, what Mistika does is basically create, there you go, a sequential line of clips. Just to work faster, I'm going just to remove the thumbnails by lowering a little bit the zoom of my timeline, so in that way I will work a bit faster. So as you can see, I have all my shots placed in a sequential way in my timeline. This works perfectly well for a non-VR project, but when we are working with VR, this is not the most efficient way to work, because this forces me to put my clips in vertical, creating my stack. I can do it manually, of course, but it will be time consuming and again not very efficient. So Again, I think that we will improve this system in the future, but for now we have a very interesting trick, which is using the node graph. In Mistika, we have a node graph that is connected with the timeline. The difference is that the node graph doesn't work in a sequential way. It works in vertical in the same stack. So instead of importing the media here, we can just import the media here in the node graph. So I can just drag and drop, and there you go. Now we have my clips loaded in vertical perfectly well. So we can just start working with this. Now, before making the stitch of my shots, I'm going to show how I import this media into my project, because it's a really important step for the workflow that we're going to show here. So I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to import the media to my project. So I'm not going to use this media that I have already imported. I'm going to import again this folder. I have this folder here in my material, and in here I have my raw media that I'm going to import into my project. When you import something in Mistika, basically what you create is a link to the original media. We don't move media, we don't copy media, we don't delete media, we just create links to that media. So as you can see, if we navigate inside my folders, I have a Titan folder and shot one. The extension is JS because I have transcode from the original files to JS for this demonstration. It's not because to get better performance, it's because the duration of those shots was very long. So for that demonstration and to create the render, I just cut a little bit the shots so I can work faster. But the metadata, the timecode, the name, everything is identical to the original files. It's a non-compressed, it's a lossless file, so we haven't lose any kind of media, any kind of information. So again, it's the same file but with another extension, with another format. All right, so one of the most tricky parts of working with VR media, in this case working with the Insta360 material, is that if we take a look to the name of the shots, they are identical between the different shots. So we have origin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 7, 8. And if we go to the shot 2, we still have origin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. If we go to the shot 3, we have the same result. And of course, if we go to the Insta360 Pro, we have the same result. This is problematic because when we conform something, not only Mistika, in any other software, you need to use unique elements for in the clips to conform against those clips. So the system needs to understand that this shot over here is different to this origin one in there. And right now, the tape name is the same, the clip name is the same. The only difference is the timecode, which is not very trustful. So at the end, we need to create some unique files, which have to generate more unique files for those cameras here. So the way to do it is to import with this setting. As you can see there, the most unique aspect right now in this organization of my shots is the name of the folder. There is only one origin 1 in the shot 1 folder, and there is only one origin 1 in the shot 2 folder, and the same thing with the shot 3, etc. So we're going to use this name in here to identify in a unique way those clips. So to do that, I'm just going to go to my general folder, right click, import all media, and in here you see that I have it select these options from the previous masterclass. This is normally the default looks of this window, but in this case we're not going to just stay with the name of the clip. We are going to add the directory for the clip name and the tape name. So in this way we're going to make unique names and unique metadata for each clip. So when we conform in Mistika, Mistika will understand every of those shots. So I'm going to click on import. This has created the media. If we go now to my home icon here, I have a new folder in there that has the same folder tree that I had in my media folder. And inside we can just take a look that in shot 1 now we have shot 1 origin 1, shot 1 origin 2, shot 1 origin 3. Now there is no other clip in my project that has this name. So now every of those clips is unique. And that's one of the most important points of the workflow, because now we can just move media from Mistika to other softwares and come back to Mistika to conform or recover that shot, because now we have unique elements for every clip. All right, so now is the moment to load this media into my timeline. So as I explained before, I'm going to open my node graph and I'm going to drag these clips over here. There you go. So now we have the shot 1 imported. I'm going to move it I will put them in place later. So I'm going to do the same thing with the shot 2. There you go. Let me move it again. I can just put this here, just in that point. Let's load the shot 3. See, there is some kind of overlap. This happens because we are working in the same, even because we haven't closed the node graph. Mistika is trying to load all the clips in the same point of the space, because Mistika is understanding that you are loading everything at the same point of the space. That's the reason why I just moved those stacks to avoid that kind of problem. I'm going to do the same thing with the Insta360 Pro by loading in the node graph. See, as you can see, to graph reload. There we go. So, all right. Okay, so we have the Insta360 Pro in here. All right. So now I have all my clips loaded in vertical stacks. Okay. So we have shot 1, shot 2, shot 3, and the shot 4, which is the Insta360 Pro, which is the one that is more different. Just to show different ways to stitch this media, I'm going to duplicate this stack, because for the Insta360 I'm going to show 2 options. For these first 3 shots, I'm going to use the same technique. But the first thing is to load the VR stitch effect. So we go to my effects tab and we click in VR stitch. Mistika VR is the VR stitch effect in Mistika. The rest is unique of Mistika Boutique. All the Mistika VR is contained in the VR stitch effect. And if we go in here inside, this again will take a little bit of time to load. There you go, all the thumbnails, because of the Titan footage. So in here we have all the parameters and all the buttons and all the functionalities that you can find in Mistika VR, but with another interface. This can look radically different compared with Mistika VR, but you will see that the tools and the functionalities are exactly the same and they work in the same way. One of the points that are different, for example, is that Mistika Boutique doesn't create automatically the number of cameras that are contained in our VR stitch. So if we want to make the stitch in a manual way, for example, sending these cameras to an external software like PTGUI, Hugin, or Autopano, we need to first create the cameras for this stitch. So I can just create a camera, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, because we have 8 cameras for the Insta360 Titan. Now this looks pretty similar of what we have in Mistika VR. Now, if we want to send these clips to an external software to make the calibration, we have to go to here, export image set. So we click on it. Now it's exporting that media. And we have here a message telling me that those cameras, those images has been exported to the project folder, export folder, VR set 1. Okay. So we can just go back to take a look if the files has been exported there. So what's our project? One level up, export. We have the first one from the previous masterclass, and we have the one for this masterclass. If we go inside, we have the cameras exported. So now we only need to take those files and load it in a PTGUI, Hugin, or Autopano to make the calibration, create the file from those softwares, and just import that file in here in Mistika. To import the file, pretty simple. we just go to import stitch and we load the file. In this particular case, we're not going to use the metadata from PTGUI, Hugin, or Autopano. We're going to use the metadata from Insta360 Pro, from Insta360 Titan. Yeah. So we're going to click on import stitch, and in here I have my media files, and inside all of those folders, I have the metadata file, the PRG file from Insta. So I'm going to click OK, open, and there you go. Now my cameras are already placed in the 360 space in the right way. We see that we have a very huge feather between them. That's the first thing that we are going to fix. We are going to change. The point is that right now what we want is to create a fast stitch, because the idea of this full workflow is to create a fast stitch for editing. The editor normally doesn't need a very high quality stitch with optical flow and all the adjustments done, because at the end what you want is just a reference, a proxy to make your editing, so you don't need those details. And what we want is to gain time, to have more time for the rest of the process, for the finishing process. So that's the reason why we are going to use pretty basic tools in this first stitch to send to the editor. At the same time, this workflow, as you will see later, allows, if there are several people working in this project, allows to work in the editing and in the stitching and even the finishing at the same time in parallel. So again, we don't waste time waiting for the conform file that comes from the editor. So again, we're going to make the fast stitch for this shot, and to do that, first thing I'm going to do is go to my options panel and decrease the feather because it's huge. So let's put this in 5, for example. In that way, we gain a little bit of detail, because now the transitions between the cameras is smaller. So now we are going just to improve the offsets, like we normally do in Mistika VR. Again, it's the same thing, improve the angles. And there you go. All the parameters, all the metadata, everything, all the technical aspects are in here. If you take a look to how these folders are distributed compared with Mistika VR, it's exactly the same. We have the options panel with all the optical flow parameters and the stereo 3D parameters, the vignetting, the optical flow settings, the camera defaults, the output camera, and all the input cameras that we have in here. You will see that all the shots that we are using in this masterclass are really well shot. We don't have any kind of problems of people coming too close to the camera, etc. These kind of problems are the ones that we need to avoid during the shooting, especially that one, when we break the minimum distance to the camera. These kind of problems can be fixed in Mistika using the edge points. By default, there is an edge point here created that is not associated to any camera, but just to show how can we add more edge points is the same way that in Mistika VR we can just select the camera, add edge point, and there you go. Now this edge point is linked with this camera. And another, well, this is the edge point 1 that has been associated with this camera. If we create another one, this will create another edge point here, the edge point 2. And of course, it is identical to Mistika VR. Anything that can be found in these parameters panels can be animated. So we can, for example, enable the auto key, and then if we move it, you will see that this creates a keyframe. If we move forward in the timeline and move the edge point again, this will create another keyframe. So now we have an animation over there. So yeah, it's the same system that we have in Mistika VR, but again with another interface. I'm going to remove the edge points. I don't need it in this particular case, so I'm going to leave it that way. Okay, so now is the moment to move to another shot. So we go to this shot over here. All right. Again, because we are using this 360 Titan, takes a little bit of time to load it. There we go. Oh, by the way, there is some parameter here. This is something related with this version. You won't find this problem, but if in the release version of Mistika Boutique. But this pixel ratio should be set in one to get the proper result in this particular shot. All right, so we are going to go to the next one that doesn't have the VR stitch. We have shown the VR stitch effect over this stack. Just to show how can we apply in a fast way VR stitch over all my shots, I can just use one of them as a reference, increase the size to take, oops, sorry, because this is in global. Let's create it in select. There you go. So now we can just take all of my shots, select my shots, and there is a macro here called split conform that will divide the VR stitch per stack. So now we have applied a different VR stitch per stack. Okay, so let's continue to this one. We're going to follow the same procedure in this case, because again it's the same camera. In this case, we're not going to create 8 cameras because the metadata from Insta automatically creates those cameras. So I'm going to import the stitch directly. So we'll go to here, import the stitch. This is the shot 2, and there we go. We're going to make the same thing. Just go to my options panel, decrease the feather. There you go. And again, improve the offsets, improve the angles, and that's it. That should be enough for the editor. Next shot. Well, I can navigate through the storyboard as well, but I just use the timeline for that. I'm going to do the same thing, import the stitch. This is the shot 3, open. You see that this one has a huge feather between the cameras. So in this particular case, I need to decrease it a lot. Let's put it at 5 again, and improve offset, improve angles, and that's it. And this is the image that again we will send to my editor. Okay, now let's go to the Insta360 Pro. I have 2 cases here. It's the same shot, but we are going to stitch this shot in 2 ways. I'm going to start first with the presets because it's the normal way that we have to work in Mistika in Mistika VR. To load the preset in Mistika, there is no button here or a right-click menu to load it. We have to load it from the browser. We can load it using the Windows Media Browser and navigate to my preset folder. In my case, I just add it to my bookmarks here. So I have the camera presets here. If I make double click, this is the default folder. Is the users, your username, HGO, app data, VR, etc. camera presets. But you can move this folder to anywhere else. Well, I recommend to copy it because in VR, when you make a right click and load preset, it goes directly to this folder. So you can copy this folder to anywhere else and load it from there if you want a faster path. So in this case, I'm just going to take the preset for this camera, which is this one, the Insta360 Pro, and just drag and drop. There you go. Now the duration of this VR stitch is smaller compared with my original shot. So pretty simple, just Ctrl C to copy. Oh no, sorry. Ctrl C and Ctrl V. There you go. I'm going to remove the original one that we did and just extend the scope of my effect to take all of the cameras. So now if we make double click, there we go. We have the cameras in the right place of the 360 space. Now is the moment to improve the offsets, improve the angles, and there you go. We still have some problems here in the feather area between the cameras. Those are the ones that needs to be fixed with optical flow, but again, optical flow will require a bit more time for rendering, and we don't want to waste time right now on rendering for the editing. So we're going to leave it that way. Another option, if we go to this one, which is the same shot, is just use the Insta360 Pro calibration. So if we click it, we get the same result in a faster way, and we just need to align the offsets, align the angles, and we get a pretty similar result. So now is the moment to make the render of those shots to send to the editor. Just because we have one of those duplicated, I'm going just to remove it. And to make the render of those shots, what I'm going to do is to take all of them and select the edit marks. The edit marks selects in the whole timeline in Mistika which part you want to render. If we go now to the output panel, we have here the settings for the rendering. I've just selected the progress proxy for my rendering. I'm using the tape name, so we use the internal tape name of those clips. If we select one of those and we go to edit attributes, you can see here the attributes of the clip, and you see that the tape name is shot3 origin 1 because we import the media in this way. The media name is still origin 1, but the tape name, which is the important metadata field in this aspect, is unique per shot. So we're going to stay with the tape name for the editing. So we basically render with the tape name selected. And another interesting feature here for make even more unique any of those stacks is using, instead of using the clip timecode, which is the default state of this button, we can use the timeline timecode. The timeline timecode it's not necessary, it's not mandatory in this case, but it will make that any of those shots has a unique timecode for sure, because of course this shot over here cannot have the same timecode here because it's using the timeline timecode. So it's another way to add more specific values for each of those shots. Finally, because again by default Mistika render everything as a single clip, we need to come to here and select by timecode. So in this way we will render any of those shots individually. So basically we are going to make a proxy by shot and using the timeline timecode as a reference for the timecode. Again, the only field that here is not mandatory is the timeline timecode. You can use clip timecode again, but this is a more secure way to do it. At this point, you just need to come to here to the foreground. It will start the render, and then you can just send those proxies to the editor. I did it before, of course, because I'm not going to spend time of this masterclass waiting for the rendering. So when you render something in Mistika, it creates basically two files. We go to my project folder over here, go to render. As you can see, we call it for editing, so we have a folder called for editing, and inside we have all my clips rendered. As you can see, there are two files per clip, a CLP and an R&D file. If we load the CLP, we can just see the stitched file. It's a proxy, so it moves really fast in Mistika, and this is the file that is going to be used in Premiere a bit or Final Cut to make the editing. The CLP is not the real extension of the file. If we go to attributes, we see that this is in fact a ProRes proxy, so it's a MOV file. The CLP is the extension in the internal extension in Mistika for the link. It's a link for those files that has been created inside Mistika Boutique. It's the same thing that the LNK that we have in here. So when we import something, Mistika creates LNK, which are links to the original media. The CLP is the same thing, but in this way we can know that this file has been created inside Mistika. But it's the same thing. It's a link to the original render file. But the CLP is not very interested in this workflow. The file that is interested in this workflow is the R&D file. Because the R&D file, if we drag it here in my timeline, is basically a group that if we open it, this is not this doesn't have any media. This is a pure metadata file. And if we open the group, basically what we have is all the links to my raw media and all the VR stitch with all the parameters and all the adjustments that we have done in this shot before rendering. The great thing of the R&D is that these two files shares the same metadata. So when we conform, instead of conforming against the CLP, we're going to conform against the R&D. So let's do it. We are going to go to my media folder. And I have here in my media folder some XMLs created in Premiere in this case. I have two. I'm going to start with the first one, with the editing version 1. So I'm going just to drag and drop this media. And here opens the Conform panel, all right? I'm going just to move and use the default settings because they are okay for this situation. So next. And in here, instead of select the LNK or the CLP, what I'm going to select is the R&D. So I'm going to disable the LNK and I'm going to conform against the R&D. If we go to the match rules, we can just take a look and check that everything is okay. So we're going to use the clip name, the time code, etc. So that's fine. And then we click in perform. There you go. Now, as you can see, I'm going to close the media. We have a list of clips in here that are groups, and every of those groups basically contain the raw media, the links to the raw media with the VR stitch. So basically, we have, using the render result from the fast stitch, we have conformed a full timeline using the raw material and the VR stitch parameters that we use at the beginning of my process. In fact, this is a one track, but if we want to see the result in a similar way like this, we can just take all of them, go to macros, and click in trim and ungroup. And as you can see now, we have all my shots, which are basically the same shots. It's the same shots, the same structure, the same parameters of the stitch here, but with the edit done in Premiere. Now, at the beginning of this masterclass, I explained that this workflow, if there are many people working on it, allows to work in parallel between the editing and the finishing process. For example, in this case, during the editing, someone can start to make the fine stitch for those shots. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to basically, in those situations, just apply optical flow so you can see the difference. So I'm going to apply optical flow. There you go. So now we see that optical flow has been applied. We can just go to the next shot, and we're going to do the same thing. We are going to apply optical flow over there as well. There you go. So optical flow. Now the third one, optical flow. And I'm going to, for this shot, I'm going to apply not only optical flow, which is the first thing I'm going to do, but because this shot, of course, is a stereo 3D, I'm going to play a little bit with the stereo by enable my black and white anaglyph. And I'm going to try to converge the background, which is the right way to work with stereo 3D footage in VR. So I'm going to try to converge all this background. For doing this, I'm going to do it in the same way that in Mistika VR. I'm going to enable my overlays, clicking shift, and just drag the image until I converge both of them. And I'm going to do it per pair of cameras. So something like that, and something like that. All right, and here. Okay, let's say that this is okay. Now, I have just make the fine stitch in these shots. But of course, when I render something, it will use the old parameters of the stitch of the R&D when we render something here. Now, how can we adapt this work into this edit? It's pretty simple. I can just take all of my shots, copy them. All right. And now if we go to here, I select my editing. I can just go to match and paste functionality. And the match and paste functionality will try to match, to put and place the effects matching the shots using the metadata. In this case, by default, it's only selected the media source path. But I always recommend to enable the three options. We are going to use the source path, the timecode range, because let's imagine that you have some kind of animation or some kind of change that change during the duration of the shot. Then this timecode range will adapt that change in the new editing, or the real name as a third option. So I'm going to use the three options over here. And then we have the option for the paste. It's asking where to apply those effects, if we want to replace the effects with the new ones, which is what we're going to do, or if we're going to put the new effects on top, so it will put them on top of those old VR stitch effects, or do not replace, which is like doing nothing really. Then in the animation options, in case that we have any keyframe, we can just ignore the keyframe, so it will just paste the effect without any animation. Keep the original keyframe, so it will keep the original position of the keyframes from my reference to the target, which is normally the way to work, because of course if you have placed a keyframe at some point of your timeline, it's because something is happening at that point and you want to keep it. And the third option is very well used as well. is to scale the animation to the new duration of the shot. In this case, because we don't have any keyframes, we can just select any of the three options because it won't do anything really. So we click on paste. And basically what this has done is to replace the effects with the new stitch. So if we go to here, we see that the stereo 3D now has been applied. All the metadata of the new fine stitch has been applied. We can just go to my options and the optical flow is enabled. We can just go to the next shot and you will see that optical flow is enabled. So everything that we have done in these 4 shots in here has been automatically adapted to the new editing by just copy and paste that effect. This can be used as well for any other effects. So again, we can just use this functionality to manage the color grading. So let's start with some color grading stuff. Okay, so we can do it in 2 ways. We can do it in the traditional way, so I can just use a color grade effect on top of it. So color grade for all of my shots. And then in here, I can just do something over this clip. I'm going to make just some quick color grade adjustments. It seems okay, it's loading the storyboard, so it's calculating everything. Of course, because we are using the raw material, Mistika needs to calculate all those thumbnails over here, so it can take a little bit of time. Now it's working. Let me see. There you go. Okay, so once we have it, we can just make some basic adjustment. Just out something like pretty simple. Let's move it something like that. Let's put it something like more cold effect. All right, something like this. We has just neutralized this kind of yellowish effect over my image. What we can do as well is, as we did in the first masterclass of VR, recover the highlights that we have here in the sun part and in the clouds without affecting the rest of my shot. So to do that, I'm going to put my pivot at 80% or something like that. And with the soft clip, I can just recover those highlights without affecting the rest of my range. We can just continue working on that by changing, for example, a little bit the color of the sky. So we can just create another layer, go to fixed vector, and in here we can just change a little bit the color of the sky. For example, increasing a little bit the saturation. So there you go. Now there is small change, but a change after all. All right, so let's say that now my color grading is done for this shot, and we want to use, of course, this color grade in the shots that look similar or are even the same. We have several options to do it. We can use the match and paste option again, so we can just take this, copy, select my whole timeline, and use the match and paste functionality, and this will change the color grade over there. Oh, sorry, this is not. Copy. And there, match and paste. So I'm going to use the real name to adapt it. Let's see if now take it. There you go. Okay, in this case I've used only the real name because at the end we're in Mistika, so we are going to use only the internal name of the clips. So in this case, all those clips that has the Insta360 Pro origin has been in those clips the effect has been applied. Now, this is one way to do it. I'm going to show several ways to manage my color. So one thing I'm going to do is just going to insert empty color grade nodes over here. Okay, so we're going to load this. Let's say that we want to apply this color into this shot over here, which is the 8th one. To navigate through it in the storyboard, it's just shift and click, and then I move to the new shot. This has still the old look. One way to bring this color correction over this shot is by using the double click. So double click, and there you go. Now we have just bring that color correction over my shot. Another way to do it, let's do it in the shot 9, is to save this color as a preset. So we can just open my FX presets, and I have two options here, create and create auto. All those operations that I'm doing are faster with a panel, with a tangent panel or the precision panel that will be supported in the next version of Mistika Boutique. But those panels has specific options to do those tasks in a faster way. In this case, in the interface, we have two options here, which is create and create auto. If we click in create, it allows us to put a proper name for this preset. Normally, when you create presets, you want to do it in a faster way. So we normally click in create auto, and this will create a preset in my library of presets. As you can see, the extension of this preset is PCC, which means preset for color correction. But we can save presets for any effect in Mistika. In fact, we can just come to here to my VR stitch and create auto. So in this way, we have a preset for Insta360 Pro. This is a way to create a preset for the stitching. You can just save this this preset for your timeline and use it in all the shots or in the shots that you want to apply these specific settings. Okay. In this particular case, the extension changed a little bit, is a preset for effects because the VR stitch is considered an effect in Mistika. All right, but in this case, we want to load the color correction preset. So we go again to my color grading. Oh, this is the one that doesn't have it. Okay, this has the color grade empty. So it's the same way that we use for the storyboard. Just double click and you bring it. Again, this functionality of double clicking, etc., are covered by just one button in the color panels. All right. Now, if we take a look to another way to do that, let's see if we still have, we still have one shot of this camera. All right. There's a fourth way to do it, which is using the preview option. If we select this red box is basically our reference. We have the white box for our current shot. If we click in this shot and press the left button, basically we are pre-visualizing the result of the color grading over my shot. If we release the button, we recover the original situation. Now, if we have this situation of previewing the result and make a gesture up, then we are applying this color correction over my new shot. So as you can see, there are several ways to manage the color grading in my timeline. Now, another cool option for the color grading aspect is using history or versions. In this case, I'm going to use another shot for that. So I'm going to use, let's use this shot, the Insta360 Titan. The good thing of this camera, again, is this is 10 bits color depth, so it's much easier and much smoother to work with this camera from the color grading perspective. So first thing I'm going to do in here is just create a small contrast. Okay, there we go. We can improve a little bit the saturation or change the saturation. Those orange looks a little bit oversaturated, so I can just select them using a keyer. Have the highlights, so I'm going to select the white, the orange areas, and remove those that are not very well saturated. As you can see, the selection here is really clean. If you try to do this kind of selections in an 8-bit depth shots, it will create some kind of blocky artifacts because of the compression of the files. So here is much easier and it's much smoother to work with this kind of process. So I'm going just to use this. I'm going to blur it just a little bit with 2 or 3 points. Don't need too much because the selection is pretty good, and just change the saturation of this and decrease it a little bit, something like that. We can even change the hue if we want to put another hue for that color. Let's put it something more bluish, for example, and decrease again the saturation because this looks oversaturated. Oh no, I'm going to do it in here. Okay, So now we can just select something more bluish, all right? Something like that. This is just playing with the color. It doesn't, you can do it even much better, of course. But this is an example of what can we do in here. Now, let's say that we want to create this a version of my color grade, and we want to create another version just to see how it looks. So pressing enter, it creates a number here, as you can see. There is the number 1. I can create, let's say I'm going to create another layer, and I'm going to make a very radical change, so we can see the result in a pretty clear way. So I'm going to put this in a more warm look, and then press enter again. And I'm going to do the same thing, but even put it in a colder look, something like that, and press enter again. So now we have 3 versions of the same color grade effect of the same shot. To navigate through this version, again, if you have a color panel, it's much faster because you have a dedicated panel for navigate through the versions. In here, using the interface, you can go to bring, and you have the bring H1, H2, H3 until H10. So you can navigate through those versions using those options. As you can see, we are just navigating through those versions. The great thing of the version system is that this system can be used as well for the VR stitch, which is something that many of you have requested in Mistika VR, to have several versions of the same stitch in the same shot without duplicating the shot. In Mistika Boutique, you can do it with this system. For example, in this particular case, I have this version, which is the good one. I'm going just to enable the version. So now we have 1. And now I'm going to add something different just to make a difference between them. For example, an edge point. There you go. And let's say that I'm going to change a little bit the temperature of this. Oops, not so much. The temperature of this shot to something like that. All right. So I now press version, and now I created the version 2. Again, I can just navigate through this using history 1, history 2, or version 1, version 2, and I can just switch between them in a really fast way. So it's pretty simple to navigate and to create versions for the same shot, the same effect. Everything can be used in this with this tool. Now, as we explained before, this workflow allows to work in parallel. So instead of doing this shot by shot like you normally do in a project, the colorist or the guy that is making the finishing of this shot can work in my general shots. So for example, I can just create basic color grading. I'm going just to create very simple grades just to show how can we just copy this to the rest of the shots. So let's put it, let it go. So I'm going to create one is very warm, the other one is very cold. Let's see, cold. And this is, I'm going to make it more greenish. There we go. And this is going to have like a very high contrast. Okay. And saturation, right? And now over here, I'm going to apply, let's say I'm going to apply some sharpen effect, of course. So I can just create a lot long and increase the radius to create some sharpening over my image, as we can see. There you go. We are sharpening the image. I can do the same thing for this. So sharpen here. Select lat long mode because we're working in VR. So I sharpen this, and I don't know what else. I can just create, for example, Luma key over this clip to create anything. This is just applying effect in a random way, really, but this is just to show how these effects and how this everything that we create in here will be adapted to my project over there. So we can just take this, copy, and now we go to match and paste, and there you go. Now all my work, everything that I've done in these 4 shots has been adapted to this new timeline that comes from Premiere or any other editor. Let's say that now we have a smaller version of this project. Let's say that this is like my movie, and I want to have a trailer or another, for example, a smaller version of the same commercial, whatever. I'm going to make the conforming of this XML. I'm going to do it in the same way that I did the first one, using the R&D perform. There you go. So we have my new editing here. I'm going to do the same thing by going to macros, trim and group. So now I have my new editing there, and I can just take my original media, well, my original shots, copy them, just match and paste, paste, and there you go. Now we have fully adapted one work from one side to the other, from one editing to the other. We can do the same thing in here, by the way. Oops, not this one. Well, yeah, we can just replace it, but so it's just to show you, I can just take my master editing, copy, and we will get the same result in here, of course. There we go. Oh, we have the groups. Okay, we can just remove them. All right, so basically we are just adapting one work from to the other one in a very automatic and fast way. So as you can see, the workflow using external softwares in Mistika is pretty well covered, and there is no other option in the market that can do this kind of operations. It's really, really fast managing VR shots and VR stacks in Mistika. And as you can see, we have covered a full workflow here using from the stitching to basic color grading in this case, but of course you can do very complex color grading as well, like in a in any other project, applying finishing filters like the sharpening, create chromas and keys, etc. And then finally we can just select the part that we want to render, go to the output, and create the final render. So with this final explanation, it finished the masterclass. Now is the moment to questions. You can answer any kind of question. If it's not related with VR, it's not a problem. We will try to answer all of them here. So yeah, I will read the questions and try to answer them. Okay, Doug is saying that how to stabilize 360 footage in Mistika Boutique is the same thing. It's the same thing that you have in Mistika VR. So basically, in the VR stitch, you have the stabilize option here. Basically, this will analyze the shot and stabilize after that analysis. Another way to do it is using the tracking. So in the tracking in Mistika Boutique is specifically designed for stabilized shots. When you work in 360, you need to create 2 points. So basically we have 1 point here. Let me show it. A tracker. Add another tracker. There you go. You need to create like 2 points to put in. Well, let's say that this is not stabilized, which is not the case, but you need to put it like in 2 points of the 360 space, clicking forward, and then apply the stabilization, but not in the VR stitch. You need to apply it in another effect that is unique in Mistika Boutique, which is the VR view effect. Basically, the VR view effect, by default, this is in planar. You have to put it in lat long to have the lat long image, and you will apply the stabilization in the yaw, pitch, roll of this effect, and you will get the stabilization done automatically there. So you have two options: the option that is in the VR stitch, which is the one that you can find in Mistika VR, or another secondary option, which is the tracking option. There is a third one, which is using an external plugin like Mocha, which is supported in Mistika Boutique, but the ones that are built in Mistika Boutique is the one that is in the VR stitch and the one that you can find in the tracking option. Okay. Another question is, how do you use the vector paint effect to remove the tripod with a stereoscopic over under content? Okay, let's use this same shot again. So we have this this shot. Let me move it to an area where the guy is not in there, because the guy now is like placed in the camera. Okay, I'm going to take the master clip for this shot, which is this one. So I'm going to duplicate it and just move it in here. To duplicate the stacks and shots is with the alt press and just drag. Okay, just in case you need to use that tool. All right, so let's move it to to an area where the guy is not here in the camera. Let's see if I have that option. I'm going to move from the tracking panel. Okay, and in fact, to go faster, I'm going just to remove the storyboard. Maybe at the end. Yeah, that will be enough. All right, so in case I'm not going to spend a lot of time making a very good removal of the tripod, but just to show you the technique, this shot, as we explained before, is stereoscopic. All right, so you have a stereo as well in the bottom of the camera. The way to do it is using first the VR view effect. I always recommend to use the node graph to do this operation because it's much easier to understand. So I'm going to click the VR view effect, and with the VR view effect I can just rotate my camera to select the area that I want to fix. In this particular case I will need to select as well all the shadow, etc. So I would recommend to probably rotate this horizontal and just decrease the focal length. So in that way we can try to have all the information in my shot, although maybe, no, this is probably not the best example. In this particular case, it's much better to use probably the tiny planet because I have everything here contained in my tiny planet. So in here we can just paint over my tiny planet and then recover back. Just because normally you use the planar, I'm going to use the planar as an example, but any of those modes can be used for removing the tripod. So I'm going to use again the planar, and I'm going to select what is the tripod itself, which is this part over here. All right. So now I'm going to go back and insert a vector paint effect. And with the vector paint, I'm just going to clone some of those areas. I'm going to increase the size, took a reference and just paint over it again in a very fast way. Not going to spend a lot of time. Okay, something like that. Okay, let's say that this is enough. All right, so let's say that this good enough. Okay, so basically what I'm going to do is to click in all shapes, all frames to extend this adjustment to the whole duration of my sequence. So now I go back and I'm going to recover these paths into my original image by duplicating this link and created another VR view effect. And when I put something as a secondary input in the VR view, it will be automatically composed in the 360 space. So I connect it, double clicking here, and what I'm going to do is to reverse the operation that I did in this VR view camera by clicking in reverse of previous VR camera. Let me see if it has worked. No, what has failed? Let me check. Oh, I just did it in the first one. It should be in the second one. So reverse of previous VR camera. Okay, just to refresh, just double click. There you go. Now, if we go to the VR mode to take a look, we see that the tripod is not in there. If we enable the stereo mode, you see that it's a stereo. As you can see, the vector paint is basically adapting the stereoscopic area that you have selected for cloning and adapted in the 360 space as well. So basically it works like an automatic way. If you stack VR stitch nodes to transform from lat long to 180 equidistant fisheye, does resolution of the source media carry through to the final VR stitch, or does the input resolution get locked to the first VR stitch node? The resolution in Mistika is dynamic, so don't worry about working at different resolution of your output resolution. Right now, for example, in this case, I'm working in 4K just to try to work faster. But at the end, I can just save this environment, close Mistika, open the mconfig, which is the configuration for the settings of Mistika, and in there I can just change from 4K, for example, to 8K. Open again this project, and if we use the same aspect ratio here, we will adapt everything that we have done at 4K to 8K, so you can render the result in 8K. And this will work for any kind of conversion that you do in Mistika, from 360 to 180 as well. The most important thing is, if you change the resolution, keep the aspect ratio to be sure that everything will be adapted in the right way. Because if you use a wrong resolution, maybe shapes can be changed because maybe suddenly they don't took the areas that you selected before, etc. So if you change the aspect ratio, just check shot by shot, or well, not shot by shot, but at least take a look to the result just in case that something is wrong. But if you keep the aspect ratio, everything should work fine. Okay. Is there a method for masking out section of VR stitch to not use optical flow for specific areas? Not right now. What you can do is to compose two stitch, and one of them doesn't have optical flow and the other one has optical flow. It's not the best way to do it, because at the end you are using like two stitches. So if your idea is basically gain more time, this is not the best way, but I'm going to explain it just in case you want to know how to compose the same stitch or different stitch from the same so for the same shots. So for example, in this case, I have this situation where optical flow is applied. I'm going to duplicate this stack, put it in there, and in the VR stitch, I'm going just to create a shape. You can use the lat long shape in case that you want to do that you want to make that your shape adapts to the 360 space. In this case, I'm going just to use the planar mode, because I'm going to create like a very basic selection so we can see the result. For this shot, I'm not going to apply optical flow in this stitch, so I'm going just to click in nearest camera. That's the reason why we get this kind of blurry effect or double image. In fact, let me see if I can even increase it so we can see it in a more clear way. Okay, well, not too much. All right, that should be enough. So now if we compose these two with a Com3D, we see that this part has the mask that we use in this second stitch, but the other part is perfectly well stitched using optical flow. In fact, if we take the shape, if this allows me to take the shape, let me see, there we go. I can just move it and you see, no, it's not composing. Let me check again. This is creating, oh, it's not creating an alpha. That's the reason why it didn't work. Okay, so the VR stitch, I'm going to apply this shape then not in the VR stitch because it's not creating an alpha. Where I'm going to apply this in another effect. There is this is like a, well, like a it's not advanced, but it's a pretty common trick in Mistika users, which is using the scope effect to create shapes, because the scope effect is like an empty effect. So many people apply the shapes in here so they can just move this effect to any other shot and they will have the same shapes. So I'm going to paste in here the shape. So now we know for sure that we have our alpha. And now with the Com3D, we are just basically having this. I'm going just to change the temperature so we can see the difference in a more clear way. There we go. So now basically we are just using this shape to isolate an area, and I'm making the compositing using as a background the stitch with optical flow, and as a foreground the stitch without optical flow. So in that way you can merge both shots. In fact, actually this technique can be really good for those VR shots that are really complicated and has optical flow artifacts. With edge points, you can isolate some objects to clean the artifacts in one stitch, and then in the other areas that are not clean, you can use a secondary stitch and then compose both to have a clean result. It requires a little bit more time to render it, because at the end you're rendering two stitches for the same shots, but it's a good way to solve those complex situations. All right, could you show us a quick roto paint fix in a Stereo 360, please? Basically, what we have done in here, let me see. Let me see, roto paint. I'm going to change the temperature there. I don't have here optical flow. Okay. Optical flow. Well, for that, I think that for that I'm going to use one of my renders to go faster. It's the same thing using the full stack, but I'm going to use in this case the render so I can just move a bit faster in my clips. So let's take a look to this one. See if nothing is moving over there. So let's see if there is one of those shots has some moving objects. So one. All right, let's take a look. Okay, so I'm going to use this guy over here. So what I'm going to do is to track this guy, and I'm going to apply some kind of painting over there. It's going to be like very fast and not, and of course not very accurate, but the technique is this one. So what I'm going to do first is to go to my tracking node, and in here, instead of using 2 tracking points, I'm going to use just 1. I can use a shape as well for the tracking. In this case, I'm going just to use a point and just clicking forward. Why is not selecting this? Forward. Let me check. Instead of doing it in here, I'm going to using a framing node. Let's see if now create shape and see if this generates some tracking. All right, so from this track, basically I'm going to remove those tracks that are not working really well, which is those ones. If we move forward, we can just take a look to this one as well, and just removing those. That track, I don't need a track really. I just need that shape, sorry. I just need the track. Okay, so I have this, perfect. And in fact, with 1 is enough. Okay, so now we have a track apply over this guy. And I'm going to paint over this guy to remove that part. Just because this guy is like in the center of the image, I can just paint over it. Vector paint. And go to my paint option here. The brush is pretty huge, so I'm going to decrease it. And I'm going to paint over here like in a very fast way. In fact, instead of using this, I'm going to use this part. Okay, something like that. I'm going to create all shapes, all frames. Now, if we select this vector paint, I can just apply the track over this vector paint by clicking in move. So in that way we have applied the vector paint, and this comes because this application is a little bit tricky. We have to go to the paint again, select my shape or all shapes, and copy tracks. So in that way this will follow the guy. As you can see, well, the movement of course is not is following the guy, but is calculating every frame the position of the patch. One way to do it, if you want to have the same patch across the whole position, is just freeze the shot, or using texture, normal image texture, and just follow the object that you want to remove. But this is the technique for using it, and this will work again as we explained before in Stereo 3D, because the vector paint work automatically in Stereo 3D. So it will take the stereoscopic information of the reference area that you have used for applying that track. Okay, we wrap 180 degrees, are automatically linked, smoothed when color grading VR. It's wrap are automatically linked, smoothed when color grading VR. I guess if you are referring to the edge of the 180 space. Those are not applied, they are not smoother automatically. I guess you have to make some kind of selection to work and smooth those edges automatically. So one option, if you have when you have 180, one of those parts will look black. You can select in the color grade a black area. So let's put in color grade. This is not the best example. Let me see how can we. Okay, so I'm going to fake it. This is not, because this is not 180, but let me fake it by scaling this up. There you go. Now, if you work in this area and you don't want to apply any color grade in the black area, and you want to smooth a little bit the edges over here, because if we go to here, we have the alpha. We have several options. One of the options is to first apply a blur here, blur in the alpha, which basically, if we select the alpha, this will blur the edges. So in this way you are blurring the edges, and this blur will be applied as well in the color grade later, because in here you can just select, or you can even bring the alpha directly. So we can just go to the output, enable external key, mask, and basically you are using the alpha as a selection for your grading. So now if we enable here the highlight, as you can see, we are just selecting the alpha area to make the grading. If we make any color, any change, for example, in blacks, you see this won't affect the black area that you have around the 180 in this case, or any selection that you have. And in that way, you can just smooth a little bit your edges for applying the color grade. So yeah, you can use several techniques. You can do the same thing as in the color grade directly, but I always like to have, like, in every step one effect, so at least I can just bypass, see the difference between them, etc., to see the result. Can you edit CLP clips in Avid and then import the storyboard into Mistika Boutique? Yeah, well, basically it's what we have showing here. The CLPs are the proxy files, and the CLP is just the link to those proxies. In this particular case, this is a proxy that we have rendered in Mistika. When you load it directly from here from the media, it's a CLP, but internally is a ProRes file with a MOV extension. So you can use that shot directly in Avid or Premiere or Final Cut, and then bring back conform against the R&D to create this all this workflow that we have shown in here. Or if you want to use directly the rendered file for your clips, you can do this. You can do it as well. Instead of conforming here against, let me show it, against the R&Ds, instead of using the R&Ds for the conform, you select the CLPs and you will get the same result, but with the shots already stitched. So there are two options. In this workflow, we show a more advanced option using the R&D because, well, we want to keep the raw media. We want to keep all the VR stitch parameters. We want to keep basically a non-destructive workflow that we can change at any moment, at any point of the process. What upscaling algorithm does Mistika use? It depends. It's up to you. It depends of the effect and the process. In here we have the filter. We have bcubic selected by default. The best one is the 15 taps, which is a much better filter for scaling the resolution. But you have nearest, bilinear, and bcubic for making those operations. Bcubic is normally the one that is selected by default, but you have these two options, 7 taps and 15 taps, to increase a little bit the quality of the scale operations. They are not selected by default because Mistika has been always focused or oriented to work with the client in the room, and for that reason we normally select like filter that allows us to have a real-time playback in a very secure way. 15 taps can decrease a little bit the performance, and that's the reason why it's not selected by default. Okay. Basic questions. You can you can cut with CLP rough stitches in Avid and then bring back in the cut and conform in Mistika Boutique. Yes, it's again it's what we show in here. You can for example, there are two options. The one that we have shown here is with the R&Ds. Of course, here we can just make any editing adjustment that we want. For example, we can group them. We can just navigate internally, cut, move, trim. For example, let's say that we want to trim 10 frames from the tail, so we can just trim the effect, or from the head, we can just trim it. This is creating an overlap. That's the reason why we have this kind of red warning. But if we select, for example, local, this will move the nearest shot, and if we select global, it will move the full timeline. So you have the three options for trimming. You can make any editing. These three options can be used as well when we work with the CLP directly, which is basically our stitch or our rough, our fast stitch. Basically, we can just move internally, cut, move, try to group them, make some kind of trims for the global settings or only for the local one without affecting the rest of the timeline. So you have all the options for editing here. In fact, in the first VR Masterclass, we focus on doing the editing directly in Mistika Boutique because we offer all the possibilities. We offer the possibility of working everything on Boutique, and we offer the possibility of a more complex workflow with other softwares. We know that in real life, people use other softwares for specific tasks, and Mistika is always really open when it comes to work with other softwares in the same pipeline. Okay. For like smooth it, looking directly back. Mike, I'm trying to understand your questions, but sorry about that. Let me see. For example, sky, but for 360, looking directly back. I don't understand the question. Sorry, Mike. He's asking something related with edge wrap are automatically linked smooth when color grading. Not quite sure of what you mean. If for any reason, because I don't know what you mean. If you have a question and you have a proper example of that, please send us a ticket with that case. So for example, if an effect wraps around 360, so left edge is different from right. Okay, I understand now. All right, so yeah, there are some effects that has that functionality. So for example, let's apply it here in the blur effect. All right, so the blur effect, if we blur the image here like a lot, and we go to the VR mode, if we go to the edge, you see that here we have the edge cutting the image. That's because the mapping is in planar mode. But if we select lat long, automatically it smooths the edge, and now you have a proper 360 sphere. This can be used for blurs, for sharpen, and from other effects. Not all of them has this functionality, but many of the effects that you can find in here has that option to move between planar and lat long, including shapes as well. So for example, shapes, right now you can use or a planar shape, for example, planar shape. So if we create something like that, it will take the bottom part of the image. But if we select this and change from planar to lat long, you see that automatically is creating the distortion of the 360 space. So basically it adapts to the 360 space, and if we enable the VR mode, you will see that that shape is in fact planar but in the 360 space. So that option is included in many effects and many tools in Mistika VR.